Hey, it's Silver. This is Gunhead. So this game is actually the sequel to Cryptark, which is interesting because Cryptark was actually a 2D game, whereas this is a full 3D one, but you will see a lot of similarities in terms of the overall structure and stuff. So this is a roguelite where you are sent into a cadre of increasingly dangerous old spaceships in order to destroy their brains and or bosses living at their cores and try to make it out alive while, leaving the Hulk behind for salvage. In order to accomplish this exceedingly dangerous task, you'll be given a mech suit and 4 weapons as well as an item slot and just sort of sent on your way, and it's up to you to decide how to actually go about dismantling all of this stuff in order to get to the core, destroy it, and get out. And the main sort of gameplay idea here is that every ship is going to have a whole bunch of interconnected systems in it, and each ship is going to have a bit of a different combination of rooms and systems for you to navigate, and it's up to you to decide what systems to disable, what to destroy, and what to just sort of try and bypass and get to the core, because you don't have to dismantle the entire ship, you don't have to destroy every single system, you just have to do enough to be able to get to the brain and take it out. So for navigation, this game is almost like 6 Degrees of Freedom shooter style. Not quite, this is not Descent, but it does have a lot of similarities. I think there's definitely some DNA from games like that sort of stuck in here somewhere. The idea is that you've got a jetpack. Most of the time you've got a jetpack. There is one mech suit you can choose that instead has like a sextuple jump. And your jetpack fuel, or number of jumps, is going to be displayed at the bottom middle of the screen, just above your health. You don't have very much health in this game, so you can't take a lot of hits. Most of the suits have 8 HP, one of them has 10, and one of them has 6. And any damage you take seems to always take exactly 1 of these points away, so you can't get hit all that much. When you destroy a system in a ship, it will sometimes drop a 1 HP healing orb thingy, which is helpful, and there will also be a limited number of health stations around the ship that you can navigate to and hold E to use, which will heal you for 3. You are at least very heavily armed, because you have 4 different weapon slots that you can populate at any time, as well as an invisible inventory of stuff that you can take with you. You just gotta press Q, and you can bring up your inventory and replace any of your weapons with any of the others that you're carrying at any given time, so you can actually carry a ton of weapons with you if you want to. And in fact, it's actually important to do so because there is no, reloading in this game. There is no way to get ammo back, no ammo pickups or anything. So once a weapon runs out of ammo, that's it, it's out, and you've got to switch it out for something else. This is why the game will be constantly giving you reasons to explore the ships, to find weapons and stuff on the ships, to continually populate your inventory so you have a bunch of backup weaponry for when whatever you're currently using runs out of ammo. It is kind of an interesting idea to create this sort of, well, really to avoid the idea of an ammunition economy, since you don't have to worry about ammo pickups or refill boxes or anything like that. The amount of ammo that a weapon starts with is all it gets, and once that's gone, it's gone. I think that's a pretty good idea for a roguelite of this sort, because it means you can't get overly comfortable with one specific loadout, since you can't replenish the ammo of that loadout eventually. Whatever loadout you're using is going to need to be replaced by something else entirely, unless you're doing a purely recharging / melee loadout, in which case they actually do have infinite ammo. You also have 1 consumable item slot, and these work in the same way as weapons. You'll find a bunch of them and you can slot one in whenever you'd like from your inventory. And these can be things like EMP blasts that can disable drones around you, to cloaking devices that allow you to maybe get to an area of the ship unseen if you're, say, low on health and you're trying to get to a faraway healing station or something like that. And there's even a nuclear device that you can detonate, which is extremely powerful and tends to destroy whatever system you plant it next to, but it does have a very, very large blast radius that you are going to want to not be in. As far as weapons goes, there's quite a good variety of them. You've got stuff like your usual sort of machine guns of various types, like a heavy machine gun that slows you down when you fire it but is really strong, burst fire machine guns. You've got blasters, which actually have a gauge that depletes as they're fired, and they have to recharge for a minute when you actually stop firing them. So this is one of the few examples of a weapon that does have something kind of like a reload mechanic, but they still have a limited ammunition capacity altogether as well. You've also got stuff like shotguns, which are really fun in this game because of the sort of floaty, almost zero-G nature of the combat. There is gravity, but it's sort of limited, and this means shotguns are really fun. You can really tear apart the drones with them and send them flying, and they're just really satisfying to use, especially the flak guns and the bouncing or piercing shotguns and flak cannons and stuff. They're just a lot of fun to use. You can also find various types of auto cannons, grenade launchers, missile launchers of various kinds, flaming mortars, cluster grenades, and even some more exotic stuff like energy weapons of various kinds, which have been some of my favorite because they tend to just be kind of strange. You've got like rail guns and energy repeaters that actually home in, or like these weird sine wave shotguns that actually fire really rapidly, so they're like machine gun shotguns that fire in really weird patterns. There's some really cool stuff here actually, and the huge variety of weapons is one of the game's strongest points. And it's very clear what they're going for when you actually combine these mechanics and see how they work out, because you have a large variety of like 60 plus weapons. You've got 4 weapon slots active at any given time. You have a large inventory that can hold all kinds of weapons, and as well as a ship full of weapons that you can go and find from their stations, and you have a limited amount of ammunition for each weapon that can't be restored. So when you put all this together, this means that you have a very frantic game where a lot of the combat is extremely fast-paced, but also sort of limited because you can only fire so much, and you have to save some of your ammunition for actually taking out these ship's systems, so you're going to need to be strategic about some of the deployment of some of this limited resource that is your ammo. And there are also a couple of other bits, like for instance you can sometimes find basically upgrades from stations. There will be these little hollow stations that are floating around the ships in various places, and these are the things like the healing stations that I mentioned, but also they can have these little purple holograms around them, and these will be new weapons, new active items, and also these passive upgrade items, which is, I mean, that's a roguelite staple, right? You have like passive items that you stack up in order to get more powerful, but this game doesn't use very many of them. There aren't tons and tons of them. This is not like a Binding of Isaac situation where like the entire game is about stacking passives. In this case, it's more about getting a reliable amount of active weapons. But the passives that you do find are extremely powerful and worth actually traversing the ship for, because they can be things like a flat 20% increase to all of your weapons' damage, or a flat 20% increase to everything's fire rate, or something like that. Even some other really powerful defensive stuff like an immunity to hazard damage, so all of the sort of passive hazards on the ship like flamethrower turrets and lava and stuff like that doesn't damage you, or even immunity to nuke damage, so that nuclear warheads in all the various forms you can find them won't affect you at all. You'll be totally immune to them. So as you're exploring the ships, the first thing you'll notice is that you're given a really nice map to actually plan out your strategy as soon as you jump into the current ship. You have a sort of Slay the Spire like map where you choose from ship to ship. You'll have a choice of usually 3 ships each jump, and you'll be able to pick whichever one that you like the idea of. It'll show you a quick preview of like the number of healing stations, the average number of drones, and the number of different systems that'll be on that ship. And then once you jump to it, you'll get a more specific map layout of the whole thing, and it'll even show you which doors are locked so that you'll be able to plan out how you actually want to attack this thing. There are keys that you can find in these orange hollow stations throughout the ship, and you can use one of those keys to unlock any one of the locked doors in a ship that you want, but they are of course expended on use, so you've got to use them carefully. There will also be a list of optional objectives, because you do actually make money from salvaging these ships. You'll get a certain flat rate of money from just completing the ship, as well as any bonuses from all the optional objectives that you actually complete, and you use this money in order to buy new licenses, which is what unlocks new weapons and items for you to find. The different interactions of the ship systems is one of the coolest parts of the game's exploration, because it gives you a lot to sort of work around. You may have something like a security system which will trigger alarms if certain linked systems are damaged. It'll show like a red line in between systems that it's attached to, and the alarms will lock all the doors and also alert all of the drones in the area as to exactly where you are, so you'll get swarmed and you won't be able to escape the room for a little bit. There are also certain things that are pretty devious, like the nuke system, which actually makes it to where every time you destroy a system in a ship that has an active nuke system, it sets off a nuclear explosion where that system was, so you're almost definitely going to take a ton of damage if you don't take out the nuke system first. There's also some nasty stuff like the scrambler systems, which are represented by these eye symbols. These will disable your map entirely at first. You won't have a map of the ship at all. You'll just see the system symbols floating in the air where they should be, but you won't actually see any layout around them. And as you explore, it will sort of uncover Fog of War style to sort of map the ship based on what you've seen. And in fact, there is a passive item that you can find that drastically increases the radius which this happens to make it a little bit easier. But then, you know, the idea, of course, is you want to find find and destroy these systems that make up this scrambler, and then when you do so, it'll actually show the whole map so that you can actually know where you're going. And there are a ton of other systems as well, shielding systems that will be linked to one system in particular that will prevent it from taking any damage at all until you destroy the shielding system first. There are hazard systems that fill the ship with more environmental hazards to navigate, as well as fields of mines that will actually home in on you and stuff that you really do want to blow up if you can, because it'll get rid of all the mines for you. There's the shuffle system, which is a huge pain to deal with because every like 30 to 60 seconds or so, it will randomly change the place of all of the active systems in the ship. They'll just all teleport around until you destroy the shuffle systems, so that's a problem. And there's also the failsafe, which by itself doesn't do anything, but the first system you destroy, the failsafe will take the form of it and back it up, so you'll have to basically destroy it twice. You'll find that when you first start out, the systems are all singular, so once you blow up one version of a system, it's gone for good, unless there is a repair system on board, in which case it can actually bring them back online if you leave it for too long. But as you get farther into a run and these ships get larger and more complex, you'll discover a lot of systems have redundancy, so that you have to destroy multiple nodes of them in order to take the whole system down. And then, of course, there are the bosses. Occasionally, on certain jumps, you will encounter a list of bosses, usually different ones, and you can choose which one of the bosses you actually want to take on this time. And oftentimes, the boss will be either alarmed or locked in a room or shielded or something, so you can't just run straight to it. You do have to actually explore the ship a little bit to break the shielding and stuff like that in order to actually be able to access the boss. But once you do, you will have a boss fight instead of the brain. The brain itself that you normally destroy to complete like a standard salvage mission is just like a big brain that you have to destroy both sides of, and it will launch like large screens of projectiles at you. But the bosses instead take the place of this core, and in order to complete those missions you have to actually beat the bosses, and they're all different and they're all pretty challenging in my opinion. There's stuff like the matriarch, which is like a big spider. There's things like the observer, which is like a huge bullet hell horrible thing. There's things like the Tyrant, which is like a mobile weapons platform. There's a big giant worm thing. So there's a good variety of pretty well-modeled bosses. I think overall the aesthetic of the game is good. The enemies, the drones, and the bosses look really cool. They're technological, but they're also a little bit organic-ish. This is backed up by the fact that when you beat a boss, it actually has like a bone trophy in your ship to show that you've beaten it. But each of the enemy drones has a very specific silhouette, a specific appearance, so you always know exactly what they can do. Like once you learn what an enemy does, you'll be able to always tell when that one's around. They have certain sounds and certain cues and stuff that help you identify them immediately. I should also mention that you can spend time outside of the ships if you want to. You can go into the vacuum of space, and you will have to do this sometimes because rooms might be locked, requiring you to actually escape a hatch and then find a different entrance hatch somewhere else. Some ships are also made of multiple disconnected bits so that you have to actually go into space in order to traverse between them. You do have to be careful though, because you can't defend yourself in space. You can't fire any weapons or anything, although you do move really fast. But a lot of the ships will have large sections of turrets attached to them on the outside, and they will fire out huge storms of projectiles towards you if you spend very long outside. So it is something that you want to do quickly. You want to just dip outside for just a second to find the hatch and then go right back in, because you'll be followed by large clouds of projectiles if you're not careful. So overall, I think the gameplay loop here is a really satisfying one. The combat is really solid because the weapon system is fun to mess around with. It's nice to have 4 at once. That's a pretty cool idea. And they have a lot of variety to them, and they're just in general fun to use. It's satisfying to sort of formulate a plan of how to dismantle this ship as efficiently as possible and then actually put it into action and do it. And overall, it creates a really enjoyable, just one more run kind of feeling because of the good amount of variety of weapons, and the good amount of variety in ship systems and layouts keeps the overall gameplay loop from feeling too repetitive due to the large number of situations that you can find yourself in. If I had a couple of criticisms, one would be I kind of wish there was an extra tile set or something, because right now all the different kinds of ships all look the same on the inside, and I think it would be nice to have that bit of visual variety, to have the different types, like a military ship versus an old derelict hulk versus an overgrown ship and all this stuff. If they had a little bit more visual identity between them instead of all looking basically the same, I think that would be nice. I think that for the most part, the sound design for the weapons and stuff and the enemies is really good, but some of the weapons leave a little bit to be desired, especially the cannons and the auto cannons, which tend to just sound like grenade launchers, which I think is a little bit weak. I think they could sound a lot more substantial. And there are also some enemies that are sometimes, it's hard to tell they're actually in the chamber with you because they're so quiet, and they can absolutely come out of nowhere, like the big saw blade enemies. These guys can like dash in from seemingly nowhere completely silently and do a bunch of damage to you really quickly. And it's kind of annoying to sometimes enter a room, know they're probably in there somewhere, but they just sort of continually come out of nowhere and keep hitting you. And then there's also the boss balance, which I think might need a little bit of work. It's not like way out of whack, but it's a little strange, mostly because the Observer specifically is way more difficult than like any of the other bosses in it. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be that way because you can choose to fight it and several of the other bosses, so it's not like it's off on its own like it's meant to be a specific challenge. It's just sort of mixed in with the rest, but for some reason it's like way harder than all the others. It has way more health, it has kind of a confusing and difficult to hit pattern that its turret can appear in because it has only a specific weak spot that you can target at any given time that can be difficult to hit, and it has a constant bullet hell storm of projectiles that it sends at you that can be very difficult to avoid, as well as this one specific green eye laser attack that I honestly don't think you can even dodge. Like, every time it uses it, I take a ton of damage from it. I have no idea how you're supposed to avoid it. It seems to just hit scan you whenever it uses it, so I think maybe the Observer needs a little bit of attention in terms of just some better feedback for what it's about to do or something, because it seems oddly difficult in comparison to the other bosses. But aside from some minor nitpicks, Gunhead is actually a really good time. It's got a good amount of variety and a good amount of challenge in order to keep you interested for a while. So it's also got some pretty endearing voice acting. A couple of people voice acting you may recognize, no spoilers, but I think it's a really solid sequel to Cryptark. It was a pretty unique game, and this feels like it's following in its footsteps. So I'll put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page for Gunhead, so you can go and check it out. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.